bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go.
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50-plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go.
It is a walkthrough Wednesday. Walkthrough being the fact that nobody's going to hit anything in Indianapolis today. The shoot workouts don't even start till tomorrow. It's all walk from one interview to another, walk from one medical tent to another. Everybody poking and prodding and checking things in Indianapolis. And yesterday, Johnny Mack, some of the media assembled in Indianapolis to poke and prod Howie Roseman a little bit. And I don't know about you. You and I discussed it yesterday because we knew it was happening. 1:30, somewhere thereabouts. The GM was supposed to speak, and Nick Seranni shortly thereafter. I wasn't all that moved by what either one of them said. Maybe it comes because of the expectations I had. I didn't think much was going to be said. I didn't think much was going to be determined, and not a whole heck of a lot of it was. I heard some response on WIP yesterday afternoon, and when I was on last night, and not too pleased were most Eagle fans. What did they really expect to hear? What did you think you were going to get out of Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mentioned on the show, I didn't expect much. You know, they did have an off-the-record session, so the guys who were out there probably got a little bit more from that. At least Howie did. So from that standpoint, but yeah, in front of the microphone, he's too much of a veteran to screw things up. So you asked me about Hassan Reddick, for instance. Would he admit, it was about letting other people negotiate the contracts? And I said, no, he won't admit that, even though it is, because it serves no purpose for him. So the goal, is to keep everything on the table. You saw it in Chicago with Justin Fields. Everybody knows they're trading him, but they're trying to keep everything on the table because it doesn't serve them to go in another direction. Say, yeah, we got to get rid of this guy because we're going to take Caleb Williams #1. I mean, it doesn't do anything for them. So the Eagles are no different than anybody else, other than Howie's got more experience than most, so he's better at deflecting things and being whether you want to use savvy, whatever term you want to use. He's been through this a time or two, so he understands what to do and what not to do, basically.
And what it leaves us with is doing some reading between the lines, and I have no problems doing that. Some people do. Adrian Brown doesn't like it when we do it and read between the lines, and feels the need to come out and give you exactly how he sees things. So if anyone is not happy with me reading between the lines, sorry, that's kind of what we do. He did not put forth the ringing endorsement for Hassan Reddick. I may end up being wrong with this, and he may end up signing a new contract, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. But the one tangent he went off on is the balancing of what's best for the team right now against what's best for the team in the future. If you're not seriously considering trading a guy, I don't think you say that. I think that's an in advance, cover your backside. Here's what our line of thinking was when we went down this avenue. John, I was kind of hoping it was just Howie's way of doing business. Hassan, feel free. Go out and check the market. We owe that to you. You need to go out. And that he had a pretty good grasp about what the market was going to say and thought that his position was pretty strong. Now, remember, he did that before the cap went up. And the cap not only went up, because everybody knew the cap was going up. The question was, how much? More than most everyone thought. So that probably changes the dynamic some. And Howie may have looked at it and said, yeah, what Jody Mack tweeted last week is right. He's going to be in the 25 million per neighborhood. And even with the cap increase, we don't necessarily want to get into the 25 million per neighborhood. And John, I did come away from Howie talking yesterday. And again, it's far from over. But I think that at least in my mind, the chances of Hassan Reddick playing elsewhere next year increased with what Howie Roseman said. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think it was a ringing endorsement as in Hassan's going to be back, certainly. And I think you're right. He was asked, what's the best case scenario? And he could have said, well, the best case scenario is we find middle ground and he's back. And he didn't. And he said something about honest communication is the best case scenario with all your players. And that would lead me to think what you're thinking, and that he's going to be too expensive, and the Eagles don't want to go to that point, and they're hopeful of getting something back somewhat significant. And I think that's more likely. I'm not saying it's 95%, but I think, if you're teetering 50-50, I'm certainly on the plus 50 side now that Hassan probably won't be back. But yeah, that's reading between the lines, and I kind of read the same thing you did. And I think the hope from the Eagles is that money isn't there for whatever reason. And Hassan was underpaid on the Spurs contract because it wasn't there. So, people have a difficult time getting over the size issue and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it happens again. It's something Hassan Reddick has been dealing with his entire career. Early it was about playing out of position, but once he turned it on his last year in Arizona, it's always been about size. Well, can he really continue to do this? Will he continue to do it in Carolina? Can he really continue to do it? Well, he had his best year ever in Philadelphia. Can he really continue to build on that? He had another good year, not as good, but still very good. Two players in this league have had double-digit sacks for 4 consecutive seasons. So, that's why he's got the chip on his shoulder, basically, and understandably so. But the Eagles are, hoping that 25 million isn't there, and maybe it won't be, but I doubt it at this stage.
Here's where I would hope that the discussion doesn't need to get, but I fear that it will. Is it going to come down to Hassan Reddick or Josh Sweat? Because Josh Sweat is going to be due for a contract renewal at some point here. I thought that the drop-off for Josh Sweat this year was much more significant than Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick didn't have as many sacks this year as he did the previous year. I would more point to the way that he was used as to that dropping off more than, Hassan's now starting to get old and he just may physically not be able to do it. Josh Sweat is younger and had more of a drop-off than Hassan Reddick did. Are they making a decision internally as to there's only one of these two guys who are going to get up and above that 20 million per mark? Do you actually think it comes down to Reddick versus Sweat?
Not necessarily, because I think they understand, it's a position they value, and they understand you have to pay a premium. And I think ultimately, even if they move on from Hassan Reddick, they're going to bring in somebody at a what they consider a more cost-effective rate, whether it's, I brought up Chase Young, who's probably going to have to go the 1-year prove-it route. And if you can get a Chase Young, just spitballing, if you can get a Chase Young for 1 year, 15, 16, 17 million. And if he clicks, he clicks. If he doesn't click, you just move on. And again, when I say 1 year, 15, 16, 17 million, he's not going to be 15 million against the cap. You know how he's going to have void years and make it much more cost effective for the Eagles in the short term. You know, I think they're going to bring somebody in of significance. So it's just about, you know, budgeting and how high you want to go. So I think, you know, edge rusher's a position they value and they know you got to pay, but, you know, they're disciplined when it comes to the budget. Up and down the roster, you know, that's a high level player. You go down to a Jack Stoll. They're not going to tender Jack Stoll as a restricted free agent. They want him back. And you're talking, I don't know what the number is offhand, about three something million, a little bit over 3 million. They're not going to pay him 3 million, but they'll bring him back at the veteran minimum because they want him back. But you don't have to pay him 3 million. So why would you pay him 3 million? So they're very disciplined from top to bottom. And that I think is more effective than, no, you can only pay one. I think that is a position they know you need. In fact, they want more. For 2 years now, they've been looking for that fourth edge rusher. They want that fourth guy. It hasn't, you know, it wasn't Derek Barnett. He didn't work out. You know, they drafted Nolan Smith. He didn't work out, at least early. And how we talked about getting young players more involved. That was the most interesting part to me, by the way, Jody. There was a little bit of a disconnect there. Yeah. Howie's saying, we got to get these guys on the field. Nick came up next and he's like, hey, I'm going to play who helps us win that particular game. If there was any disconnect, that was the disconnect on the podium between Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. But Howie, from Howie's standpoint, he's like, well, obviously these guys aren't proven. How can they prove themselves if they're not on the field? And you go back specifically to Nakobe Dean. The Eagles were very good at linebacker in 2022, but they could have gotten him sometime. And maybe the startup costs are lowered a little bit. And he got injured anyway, but you get the point. And that's what Howie was trying to say. Well, sometimes you got to play young players. You can't be avoiding it. And
so you agree with Howie on that one, right? That Nick, judging Nick during his 3 years as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, has not done a good enough job through his coaches, if they're the ones who are calling out the guys for substitutions and the like, at giving guys growth time as they develop after they're drafted and they come into the league, that has been a miscalculation by the head coach.
I think overall it's been a little bit. I mean, it's always individual, like Jalen Carter played, because Jalen Carter's immensely talented. So it's always a situation by situation. I'll even go back to Jordan Davis. I thought the Eagles, look, he got hurt as a rookie, I'm talking about. And that's when they brought in Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph, more Linval for Jordan Davis. But and also people forget Marlon Tuipulotu also got hurt at about the same time. So it was more than just Jordan Davis that they had to bring in some reinforcements, and nobody cares because it ended up working and they went to the Super Bowl. But once Jordan Davis got back, they didn't play him. I don't agree with that. You got to get a mix. You know, Linval's not going to be here long term. You know, and Ndamukong Suh aren't going to be. You got to mix it. And the Kobe Dean, yeah, you got to. Sorry, like TJ was great that year. I'm not talking about TJ. TJ stayed healthy. That's what you want. But Kaiser White, come on, you know, have him sit a series or two. And Kaiser was solid, but yeah. So it's an individual. Nolan Smith last year. Was Nolan Smith great? No, I'm not trying to say that, but maybe with a little bit more time, he would have started to pick it up a little bit. I think there was a room for that. And then there's the situations where Sidney Brown played out of position because of injuries. I don't necessarily like that. Tyler Steen got one opportunity when And then they went back to Suopeta. I probably would have given Steen a little bit more rope. So it's always an individual situation, but I think more often than not, yeah, they failed a little bit in serving those two masters because you're trying to do both. You're trying to win the game, but you're also trying to develop younger players.
And don't take this as a defensive, Nick, because you and I are on the same page here. Howie's got a point that you're supposed to be winning games and also developing players at the same time. And at least in my evaluation of Nick, since he got here, I'm playing the best guy. I got to win. It doesn't matter to me. We'll worry about tomorrow. I have one duty, and that's today. And I'm going to play to win the game. And I think he overplays his hand there. But I will say this about this season. They didn't blow anybody out. We talked about it so much during the year. They won, but weren't they supposed to win by 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, playing a mediocre team? That's why I got that more ticked off last year at Gannon about Nakobe Dean, because they had 2 touchdowns leads in the second half, and he's still trotting Edwards and Kaiser White out there for every single snap. You're up 2 touchdowns. There's only 17 minutes, 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Why not get a guy out there who you took in the third round, who you talked up some reps so that he can get through the starter costs and the like? It was worth last year with Nakobe. This year, even though I think Nick still overdid it, they didn't blow out anybody. They didn't have any big leads. They weren't up 2 touchdowns well into the second half where you say, all right, let's get this guy. Let's give 12 straight reps to Nolan Smith. They didn't really have that.
Yeah, but I'm talking even more so meaningful reps. Like, I'm not talking about blowout reps that aren't important. They I get your point. They're easier to do. You probably could, you should have done it. But I'm saying significant reps. I'm saying sit, again, not TJ, but sit Kaiser White, every four, it's not a rotational position. I get that, but there's room to get Nakobe Dean involved. There's room to get and meaningful snaps, because I don't care as much about blowout snaps, because I don't think you're going to get much value out of those at that point with younger players. I'm saying they got to play, and Nolan Smith's got to play when it's meaningful. And yeah, is it difficult at times? Yeah. They went through it for years with Fletcher Cox. We got to play Fletcher less. We got to play Fletcher less. And then they would play him more and more, because you get in the game and you're trying to win the game, and you can't have your best defensive player not on the field. So I get it from both ends, but I think they could have done a better job of getting some younger players and injuries. Ringo ultimately got on the field because of injury and some ineffectiveness, but and Sydney out of position, not necessarily their fault, but early in the season, I argued they should have started Sidney Brown from day one. You probably remember that, because, where are you going with Justin Evans? No offense to Justin Evans, but exactly where you are. One and done. And one and done turned out to be four games and done, because he got hurt again. And if you talk about Terrell Edmonds, he didn't even get to one and done because he got traded. Throw Sidney out there. Who knows where he would have been? Now he got hurt at the end of the season, but you can't legislate that.
Which means you can't even plan him into the mix during this offseason, because you don't know when he's going to be back. One thing you and I do disagree on, I think there's no such thing as a meaningless snap. If you're playing snaps in the National Football League, it's meaningful. Some are more meaningful than others. That's rather obvious, but I don't think there's any such thing as a meaningless snap. I think all experience is good experience, and they dropped the ball. Nick dropped the ball on that in a couple of different ways. One other Howie point I want to bring up before we punch up our buddy Mike Gill, who's going to be our first guest. The only misstep I thought Howie had yesterday, and see if you read this the same way I did, he was asked about the championship Eagles, the veteran guys, been there, done that, had a parade. Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, and he certainly sung the praises of those guys as well. He should have. But one line that he used did kind of surprise me when he said, and the one thing you don't want to see is them in someone else's uniform. Now, I don't think that matters with Jason Kelce. Jason Kelce's either going to be here or he's going to be in a broadcast booth. I don't think it matters with Brandon Graham because I think Brandon Graham is either going to be here on a, at best, market value deal, and it's not all that high because he doesn't play as many snaps as even usual rotational type guys. So either he's going to come back or he's not. I don't think he's going to be anywhere else. Fletcher Cox at least entertained offers last year and talked to other teams and decided to come back to the Eagles and got good value. I wouldn't say he was overpaid. I wouldn't say he was underpaid. I don't think it was a team-friendly deal, market discount. $10 million is about what Fletcher was worth last year. If Fletcher decides to play, and Howie Roseman is on record in saying, well, you can't let him be in some other team's uniform, that gives Fletcher a little leverage in a negotiation, does it not? Did Johnny freeze up on me?
Yeah, in theory it would be. Did I freeze up on you?
You did, but you're back now.
Got me?
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that when we talk about reading between the lines, I think, my reading of that was how he kind of knows it's either the Eagles or retirements for both. And you're right about Brandon Graham. I mean, he's not going anywhere. So mainly talking about Jason and Fletcher.
Yeah, do you think Jason's going anywhere? Nor do I.
Of course.
But
no.
You can't tell me Fletcher's a 0% chance he plays for somebody else next year. It's not zero.
Well, that I would have told you it wasn't zero. I would have told you he's more likely to go somewhere else than be in Philadelphia. I think from Howie's perspective, and he has more information than me, I'm saying what I read between the lines is, he's gotten an indication that Fletcher's probably going to retire. That's how I kind of took that. And, maybe I'm wrong, but, and that's all you're doing is reading tea leaves, but that's what I took from that. I got the take from, that's probably because later in the conversation when Howie was talking about personnel, he was talking about positions and he was talking about the drafts. And yeah, had some of those worthless questions, to be honest, about, where are you going to go? What you're going to do? Things like that. And he mentioned defensive tackle specifically. And he said, it's a high value position, but he's being honest. If I'm being honest, he said, this is rare, but he said, we got a lot of young talent at defensive tackle. So that's not going to be at the top of our needs list, so to speak. But if somebody drops, even at that position, they'll take them because they value the position that much. But the bigger part to that was me. We got a lot of young talent, defensive tackle specific.
If you've got a lot of those talent, you got a lot of those young players.
Saying,
yeah, seems like Johnny's feed keeps freezing up. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our first break of the day here, Zander. Hopefully we get Mike Gill from down the shore from the Sports Pass, ESPN Radio, to jump in with us. We'll continue this conversation about what was said by Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni yesterday in Indianapolis here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing, the second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs, and then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Appreciate you being here with us on Birds 365. McMullen, McDonald, and Mike Gill from down the shore. We've got Devils. I see Devils. What's the T-shirt today, Mr. Gill?
I'll go in Arizona State.
Arizona State, Party School USA. There it is. That's
Arizona State was out there when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, which, according to all the talk today, doesn't seem to be attainable in 2024.
No, not if Nick has.
We're already pulling the plug, baby. Pull the plug.
Yeah, but Nick Sirianni.
I thought about this the other day in that in 2022, I might have brought this up last week. I don't remember, but 2022, remember, they didn't beat anybody. They weren't any good, and they made the Super Bowl. So were they really good last year and fall apart, or did they just suck from the year before?
Yeah, well, nobody plays. You and I have had that discussion. Nobody plays anybody. Right? I mean, nobody plays because nobody's of value. So,
well, in 2023, they actually beat the Chiefs, the Bills, Dallas, Miami. Yeah. They had good wins all year. So were they not? I'm somewhat being playful here, but it is a bizarre puzzle to put together when you think of it. Like this team in 2022 makes the Super Bowl, and the detractors. I'm not saying everybody. You know, you would get the random Dallas fans that live in this area. Where I live, there's a lot of crossover with Giants fans, and nobody took the Eagles. Yeah, they didn't beat anybody all year. Well, you made the Super Bowl. Who gives a shit who you beat? You're in the Super Bowl. And then in 2023, they're 10-1, and you're like, well, maybe they are actually pretty good. Or maybe they're not good. They keep winning games, but they don't look good. And then they just crumble and fall apart. And it was like, see, that team was never any good. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, and Nick Sirianni did say yesterday that he doesn't have to go far back into his memory when he can think of the time when the Eagles had the best culture that he's ever been around. And I'm sure he's thinking of 2022 when he says that, even though they might not have beaten a murderer's row of teams. Hey, the culture was great. Okay. Isn't culture something that's sustained? Isn't that one of the reasons why you build a culture? Because you have that as your foundation and you build on that. How did the culture crater this year, Coach? He didn't really have an answer to that, did he, Mike?
No, and, you know, he did mention he tried to go back to that, which here's the difference. And this is where this is kind of interesting for me, is the makeup of the team is different. And it's almost like Major League. And I hate to bring Hurts into this, but when Charlie Sheen's character, Ricky Vaughn, gets paid the money, he's not the same pitcher anymore. And everybody starts to look at him a little differently. Now, I don't know that people looked at Hurts differently. That's not kind of being, you know, what I'm feeling anyway, but maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe they said this guy got paid all of a sudden. He's not the same guy. What happened to the guy that was always fighting and constantly trying to get there? And now that he's got there, He's not the same. I mean, I don't know. I don't. You look around this team, you had a lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball. Was there somebody that left on that side of the ball that made the culture of that side? You talk about the culture. You had 2 new coordinators, multiple different coaches on this team, and a plethora of new players. So, yeah, you might look at the head coach and say, hey, how could you not have kept this? But as he talked about yesterday himself, you can't lead every guy the same way. You get new people in here, you've got to handle them differently, and it takes a while to figure out who could be handled this way, who could be handled that way, and they might not have just ever figured it out.
Yeah, the one thing that resonated with me with Nick was that talk about leadership and the talk about Jalen Hurts, and where I think he's right. If you're leading people, Mike, as the brand manager, program director, whatever, is somebody going to come up to you and say, all right, stop being Mike Gill. You got to be this guy. You got, to me, it's dumb. You got to be yourself. And that's what Nick said. From his standpoint, I think, and again, we're all reading between the lines. I think what he was trying to get across was the culture bad? I don't know if the culture was bad. They just lost a bunch of games. And, the difference between winning and losing in this league is ultra small. We always talk about parity. It's real. The difference between Kansas City and Carolina is not as big as people think it is. Obviously, it has to do with a few core players, but you can turn things around quickly in the NFL. We see it all the time. If you make right decisions, if you get the right player, if you can turn around things very quickly, because everybody's got good players, and you can go in a negative direction really quickly, as the Eagles kind of showed. But the leadership aspect, I agree with Nick. Where I agree with Nick is, why are you asking Jalen Hurts to be a different person? That doesn't make sense to me. Then you're not authentic. Then you come across as something more. I think that creates more problems. If you're not being yourself, you can't be a leader if you're not being yourself, can you?
No. And, it's funny. He said there's not a book on how to be a leader. There's plenty of books, but all of them say different things in it. That's
got
the
a whole
thing.
section at Barnes and Noble.
You could go and go down to whatever bookstore if they still exist and find how to be a leader by so-and-so. And it's all different. But you're right in that if you're telling Jalen Hurts, you've got to change your leadership style. Well, then, see, the weird part about that is the offense didn't change. Like, that locker room stayed almost exactly the same for Jalen Hurts. So you would think that group would have been closer and not be like, nobody was different in there. There wasn't. I mean, is Isaac Seumalo, was he missed that much? Or Miles Sanders? Were those two guys such prominent voices? Now, does the quarterback also lead the 53-man roster? And was there defections on defense that he did? I can't see that being like the sole reason. The offensive ineptitude, and that's maybe ineptitude is too strong of a word, but the offensive struggles is the more perplexing thing than anything. On the defensive side of the ball, you have a new coordinator. He comes in late. He doesn't get his chance to bring his own staff in, so he's kind of scrambling around because he's here late. Then they replace the guy. That side's a dumpster. But still, the fact that the offense lacked fluidity all season long and still produced, yet didn't look fluid in doing so, to me is still perplexing, and have not gotten a real solid answer. I know yesterday we were laughing. I was on a show last night, and the host was asking about the combine and GMs and coaches talking. And I said, the Philly GM and coach didn't say one thing about that combine. Nobody cares about that combine right now. They want to know what the hell happened, and there's still not an answer.
Right. And to their credit, they both manned up and took the questions that they did. but Eagle fans don't feel any better about it because I don't think they had the answers. I don't know that there are any answers.
I don't think they know the answer.
Exactly. You can ask them 100 times, but they're going to talk around it and they're not going to give you what you want. But here's the one question I have for you, John, and you would be more capable of answering it than either Mike or myself because you're there, you're around the team. But I don't know that you can even answer this question. Do we know for a fact, and Mike kind of hinted at this, do we know for a fact that Jaylen didn't change? That because he got $250 million, that he was exactly the same guy and led in the same fashion that he did the year before that they went to the Super Bowl?
Well, I no, number one, we can't because he's very closed off. He's very stoic, as we all say. But, the people criticizing him are the ones who are saying he didn't change. So, but that's kind of baked into it, and that he should have changed because the circumstances were different. So they're arguing he should have changed and he didn't. And I'm just speaking of the critics. From everything I hear, the work ethic and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's the importance of Jalen Hurts' leadership and the fact, some people lead by example, which Nick was kind of saying as well. Some people are very vocal. He's very vocal. He's very energetic. He's very emotional. He gets criticized for his emotion. People are different. I don't think Jalen Hurts changed. Now, because of the contract, did his off-season change? Yes. And that perhaps hurt him. I've heard that from a couple of circles. He didn't spend as much time.
I said that the day he signed. The only thing that scared me was his commitment to his off-season work, that he might be pulled in too many different directions.
Yeah, and then
that's a whole bunch of people
that
chalked up his bad season
in too many directions. I never was worried about Hurts.
That's a good phrase, Joe.
Not having enough focus, but having other people say, hey, but
you got to do this endorsement. You got to do this endorsement. You're one of the faces of the league. That's a good way. I'm glad you said that, Jody. Pulled in different directions because I don't think it was him being, you know what? I'm going to go get a bunch of endorsements. I don't think it was Jalen Hurts centric. I think it was.
But the question, I guess, moving forward with that is how do you combat that? I mean, you're Jalen Hurts, you're a $250 million quarterback. Are they going away? Is Hulu not doing live sports anymore?
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, and that's about time management and things like that. You just got to handle it, I think, a little bit better. And you got to make as Jalen would say, the main thing. So you got to do what you need to do. And then, all right, if you got time, bring it on Hulu, bring it on whatever other endorsement. So I think, I think, by the way, he learned from that. He probably learned from that. And he probably will because he knows he's got to bounce back. I don't think there's any question about that.
All right, Mike Gill, I want to ask you one of the things that Nick Sirianni said that kind of raised a red flag for me and caught my attention as soon as he said it. Because even though I consider myself a Nick defender more than a Nick detractor, a whole bunch of people calling for Nick's head on a platter. I was not among them. I thought that they could thread the needle and clean up the coaching staff, yet keep Sirianni in place. But one thing we did find out about Nick this year, when he deems necessary or the organization deems necessary, he's very willing, ready, and able to lie. Because he did about his change at defensive coordinator. He sends poor Sean Desai up there to field questions on a Tuesday as the defense coordinator when the players knew on Monday Matt Patricia was going to be calling the plays come the Seattle game. So when necessary, Nick can flat out lie or misstate the truth.
Still the craziest aspect of the whole season. That, by the way, that Sean Desai, bizarre. Bizarre.
Did not make sense to me. And right or wrong, he took the bullet at the end of the season. And even more so after the season was over and done with that postseason sit down with he and Howie. He goes, that was my call. He made that very apparent. That wasn't an organization thing. That wasn't a suggestion. He made the call and had to go get the blessing of those above him to do what he did to poor Sean Desai. I still don't know if I 100% believe that. I believe it more than I don't believe it. He sold me on that to an extent to go, do I believe him or not? I got to go with tentative. Yeah. Did you know that Nick Sirianni hired the new offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles? Did you know that was his
when
call?
He said that yesterday. He was
said
like,
that yesterday. When
yeah.
I hired Kellen Moore, and Nick has been very poignant about his use of pronouns, because it was my offense until it became our offense. So he's been very good at changing pronouns when necessary. Yesterday was when I hired Kellen Moore. You buying that, Gill?
That's a good question. Am I like the one thing though about Sirianni that I have where I'm like you, Jody, I'm willing to give the guy the bet. When they hired the guy, I mean, at the time the team seemed to be a mess, and you hire this young guy, and you're like, where did they even find this guy? I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Fine. And what made me kind of lean towards Nick as, okay, this guy gets it, is when the team was 2-5, and he said, we got to scrap this and start running the ball. Like, he understood what we are and what we can't do. And I give him a lot of credit for that year of giving up the play calling and totally shifting the offense to a more run-oriented offense. And that got that team that probably had no business being in the playoffs to the playoffs. The very next year, they grow from a 9-8 wild card team to a Super Bowl. Legitimately, were probably the better team in the game. So I do think Nick is adjustable and adaptable. John, you would probably know how stubborn he is more so than I don't view the guy as like some stubborn ox that's just unwilling to move. So when he says, I hired him, did he look at himself and say, look, we're at the point of the 2-5 team where I got to change something or it's my ass, and that he was willing to bring in a guy like Kellen Moore, who, quite frankly, has a lot of different principles than he does, right? I mean, Kellen Moore's offense doesn't look a lot like Nick Sirianni's offense. So I don't find it to be so far-fetched, although I guess it's so ingrained in our minds, Jody, that Nick is the puppet and that this organization's front office pulls all the strings.
I mentioned this on yesterday's show, and I joked Albert Breer will probably, because Peter King's not around anymore, Albert will probably confirm this 6 years from now, and everybody will finally believe it. So to Jody's point, he said, I hired Kellen Moore. Yes, Nick Sirianni hired Kellen Moore. Now, there's a layered aspect to it in that he was told he had to hire somebody. He was told he had to go outside the family, so to speak, to get a new play caller. So there's some caveats put on it. And then you get the group of candidates and how he's responsible for that. So that's his part in it. And that's where you hear Cliff Kingsbury and ended up being Kellen Moore. And those were the two top candidates and everybody else they interviewed. So it's, people have their roles, but to this point, Nick Sirianni has been given the rope, whatever, to hire the coaches. So the candidates are there, and then it's up to Nick who he wants to hire. Now, from a couple reports, from what I heard, a couple other people heard, number one on the list was Cliff Kingsbury. And at the time we said Cliff wanted too much autonomy and the Eagles had to go in a different direction. Not that they were going to hire him, but when they interviewed him, he was probably the leader in the clubhouse. That didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time because I was thinking, well, Lurie's going to probably force him to fire a bunch of people, to scapegoat a bunch of people. Ended up, no, everybody's back, essentially, with the exception of the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator. So it was very targeted. So you all have all these Nick Sirianni people. And I'm saying, well, if Cliff Kingsbury is complaining about not wanting Jeff Stoutland, all right, there's the door. I get it. But no, it was not only Jeff Stoutland. It was the running backs coach, the wide receivers coach, the tight end coach. Everybody's coming back except the play caller and the quarterback coach. So it was very targeted. Nick did hire him but there was that layered aspect of it, as you have to go outside the family. You cannot, if we're up to Nick, Brian Johnson would be here. So that's the layered aspect of it.
Right. Like, as they always say, it's a collaborative decision. Everybody, it's almost like the battles of who makes the lineup for the baseball team. Is it the manager? Is it the front office? They all sit down and look at the freaking numbers, and they put together the lineup for the day based on who's pitching and that guy's numbers against them, yada, yada. This is a similar situation. You can't bring Brian Johnson back. Pick 5 guys that you like, and we'll go that route. And I'm sure, these are guys that Nick probably had some approval of, even if you're no, he had nothing to do with this. He had to have some say of, hey, I would be interested in these 5 guys.
John, let me
ask. Totally surprised, Jody, to hear him hearing him say, I heard what you heard, and I was like, well, that was kind of interesting. Like, because we all just assume, again, I go back to that. We'd all just assume that Howie and Jeffrey run everything.
And even if not run everything, be a strong guiding hand. I was very surprised by his use of the word I. And John, you mentioned Kingsbury, and he may at one point have been, we know he was interviewed first before Kellen Moore. So if that makes him the number one choice because he's had an interview and nobody else has, so be it. Did anyone else get a formal interview? And I'm talking about actually showing up on campus, not a Zoom thing, other than Kingsbury and Moore. Did they have
for coordinate? Remember, for coordinators, you have to interview people. You have to. The Rooney Rule extends to coordinators now. So I had the list. I forget the list now, but I'll try to look it up. But yeah, they interview. It wasn't just Cliff Kingsbury and Kellen Moore. And you have to interview people by rules. So. But they were the two. It was, as it explained to me, it wasn't even I don't want to say they wanted to hire Cliff Kingsbury. I would say it was 1A and 1B. And then when things went in a negative direction with Cliff Kingsbury, they quickly went to Kellen Moore and sewed it up. So it's not like they didn't like Kellen Moore, and they could have went further in the second interview with Cliff Kingsbury, might have said something else they didn't like. They might have shifted to Kellen Moore. So I'm not saying they wanted Cliff Kingsbury above all else. It's just he was sort of the leader in the clubhouse. And at the time, it was explained to me about autonomy. And that surprised me because I immediately went to Stoutland. Well, who would complain about having Jeff Stoutland as their offensive line coach? And the answer is probably nobody, and probably not Cliff Kingsbury either. But everybody else was coming along as well. The entire offensive coaching staff, essentially, besides the quarterback coach and the actual coordinator job.
Mike, let me run something by you that kind of surprised me from Howie Roseman yesterday. I want to get back to something John and I were discussing about the championship guys and how they're handled, Kelsey and Cox and BG. But even before that, another guy who I thought knew he was going to be asked about and was interested to see what he said was James Bradberry. And he went down the road of, we might have screwed up Bradberry's season by playing him at the nickel in the early stages in camp. And how many snaps did he get in nickel in actual games, John? Like the first couple weeks, maybe a handful?
Way too many. That when first
the Tampa game.
Yeah, I way too many. I'll look it up though. But
well, there was I guess this was 2 or 3 weeks ago. We have the segment on my show, Football at 4, with the Inside the Birds guys, and Jeff Mosher was on saying, they're reporting that somebody in the secondary, they didn't even talk to the coach, and I have to imagine by process of elimination, it almost says James Bradberry did not get along with Sean Desai and did not like his role in the defense. So I find that whole Bradberry thing, because everybody just assumes, right, Jody, they're going to find a way to get rid of him. Mm-hmm. He's got $9 million contract. And Howie Rose was like, no, he's in our plans. And I'm wondering if they saw and said, this guy has more left in the tank. They just used him poorly, and we don't view that spot as a place we need to upgrade because we're all assuming, oh, they'll go out and get Darius Sneed or they'll draft a young corner. That doesn't mean they don't have to draft a young corner. Both of those guys are in their 30s. But do the Eagles view Bradberry as a guy who's lost a couple steps and fell off, or that he was just used wrong by the two defensive coordinators that they had?
I remember when they were talking about it in training camp, and the number was 127, Jody. He played 127 snaps in the slot.
That's over 17 games. It's not a lot, but those 127 weren't spread over 17 games.
No.
They were in a group of games early on in the season. So maybe Howie had the right to use that as an explanation.
Yeah, and I've said that on the show. And by the way, when Slade went hurt, they moved him to left corner. They were moving him all over the place, and it didn't make sense for what type of player he was. So from that standpoint, I've argued if you want to play devil's advocate, just put him at right corner, let him play zone with Vic Fangio, and I bet he has a bounce back year. Is he going to be a second team All-Pro? Probably not, but I bet he has a bounce back year. So from the Eagles' perspective, I think it's about, look, he's under contract, is how he said. It's a big number. You can't, if you do release him, it's got to be post June 1st anyway. So why not wait? It's not the best thing for the player. If the draft board falls your way and you're able to get one of the top corners that you like in the draft in the first round, all right, then you release him post June 1st and go in a different direction. But if you can't, if the board falls in a different direction, you got James Bradberry's probably going to have a bounce back season.
Well,
with a good
what are we supposed to make? What are we supposed to make, if anything, then of Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey complaining about the way Vic Fangio used them last year?
Well, I brought that up on yesterday's show as well. What that tells you is stop talking about Sneed, who the Chiefs are talking about tagging and trading. The Eagles, Louisiana Tech guys are supposedly texting him. You don't want Sneed. You don't want to pay $19 million for a zone corner. That's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. And you as you bring up Jalen Ramsey, what does Jalen Ramsey do well? He might be the best press corner and cover corner in football. Not happy in that defense. Xavier Howard, big time player. Press corner in his prime, not happy in that defense. What makes you think Sneed's going to be happy in that defense, coming off what he was able to do in Kansas City?
Well, then the question is, will Slay and Bradberry like their roles in this defense?
Well, Bradberry will love it. Will Slay love it? Probably not.
I guess then, John,
but he's already been in it. Slay.
But here's my question to you, John. Was this not a Fangio defense this year? I get it. Yes. The man himself is going to be coaching it. So it was a Fangio defense. So Bradberry sucked in a Fangio defense. Why are we going to believe just because Fangio comes in and is actually going to be the guy on the headsets that he's going to?
Because Fangio, one of the criticisms about Sean Desai was he threw too much at the players, and he took it to a ludicrous degree as far as coverages. And you heard it from Slay twice after the Rams game. After the first Cowboys game, you heard it from Kevin Byard. You got to simplify this, especially for the younger players. The point that I was trying to make about Bradberry from day one in training camp when they moved him, I'm like, why are you moving James Bradberry to the slot? Even why? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's Jody. Your question was essentially, did Gannon run something different that Fangio runs something different? They all have their tweaks, but you would think the coverages would be pretty uniform, no?
Right.
My argument, and there's maybe Bradberry lost a step. Maybe he's not the same. He's at that age where you have to start thinking seriously that maybe the decline is here. I'm not saying 100%. But I'm saying Fangio.
But he looked like he lost 2 steps. I mean,
that's possible. And then you have an issue, and that's where the evaluation comes in. But Fangio, I think, is smart enough to say, all right, you're playing right corner, sit out there and play. And I think that helps Bradberry. That's all I'm saying.
How much more man this year, John, would you say they ran as compared to last year with Gannon and the amount that he ran zone, and how much more zone or man do you think they'll play this year with Fangio? Comparing this past year to the year before it and projecting forward to the year
they're
after.
all, if you look at the blitz rates, it's the same scheme. They'll just be better prepared for it. They'll just do it better, but the
So
numbers
they didn't
will
play
be very
more man
no,
this year.
no,
That would be an inaccurate statement.
no,
Yeah, I
no.
agree.
That would be an inaccurate. What they did was they
Yeah.
moved people around all over the place, and they probably threw, instead of just playing quarters, they're playing quarters, cover 2, cover 6. They're going back and forth too much, and that creates miscommunication. And I think that is sort of the problem with, I think, what was going on. And you heard it from Slay, as I said, on 2 occasions. You heard it from Kevin Byard as well late in the season. Too much trying to be the smartest guy in the room, trying to do, I'm going to catch him, I'm going to fool him, instead of just playing sound, fundamental technique football.
It's the guy that goes on Shark Tank with a great idea and then starts telling the sharks about the 5 other ideas he has. They're like, no, whoa, you got a good idea right here.
Yeah.
Let's not go with the other 5 just yet.
Yeah.
You got the $10 million.
And especially when you
opportunity.
have to play, Sidney Brown, who's a safety playing slot corner, when you have to play Eli Ricks playing slot corner, when you have to young players, when you have to bring in Kaylee Ringo late in the season, and you're throwing all this stuff at these guys, and you see all these busted coverages.
Yeah.
That's where I think they had an issue with Sean Desai.
And, oh, by the way, I'll give Howie a little bit of credit and a nod here. He took a bullet for that yesterday. He said, yeah, maybe I didn't give them enough to work with.
You and Andy Reid. I got to do a better job.
Right, with the slot corners, because shockingly, Avonte Maddox got hurt. Who could have seen that happening?
Well, Jody, you're a baseball guy. The Eagles, over a period of time, it was like a baseball GM saying, throw me a single A arm in every trade, and just so I can they got like a Tay Gowan and a Mac McCain. And
I love a Mac McCain reference.
Every trade had some corner in it, and none of them panned out.
Gary Vincent Jr. Don't forget Gary Vincent Jr.
I went as far back as I gave you Mac McCain and Tay Gowan.
That was very good. Very good.
Both guys who thanks for the memories. I would agree with. All right. Speaking of thanks for the memories, are we going to be saying that about Hassan Reddick in the next 2 or 3 months? Yesterday, Howie had the chance to kind of stem the tide. Best case scenario, we got a deal done with Hassan. He didn't. He went off on a tangent about, hey, he's a Philly guy, he's a Camden guy, he's a Temple guy. It's nice that you've got his resume down, Howie, but I don't care about his resume. I care about being an Eagle Green again next year. He didn't exactly give me confidence that this is going to be a negotiating ploy by allowing him to go out and check his value on the open market that's going to end up with a favorable result for Hassan Reddick staying in Philadelphia.
And Sirianni, same thing. He kind of just repeated himself over and over and over. If you watch Ryan Poles give his exhortation about the field situation, he pretty much answered it every which way without saying, we're going to trade him by the end of the week here. Like, what other choice do I have? Roseman seemingly passed it over to Sirianni to say the same thing. Like, guys, we want him back here, but you never know what's going to happen. And there was no firm, we want him and we'll do whatever we need to take. We'll talk to Hassan. I got more of the feeling of, if we get the right deal, we'll take it.
Yeah. Same with, I got the feeling it's about budget. And if it goes to a certain number, they don't want him back. That's kind of the feeling I get. What feeling did you get when, and not even about Jason Kelce, because we know Jason Kelce is either going to play for the Eagles or he's going to be in the broadcast booth somewhere. But Fletcher Cox, I think, it was more open-ended. He might go play somewhere else, but Howie kind of said, you know what? If he's not going to play, it's going to be in this uniform or not. What did you take of that assessment? And does that lean you towards Fletcher's probably going to retire? Because in the same conversation, how he was talking about how many good young defensive tackles he has, and those guys got to play.
Yeah. Yeah, the Fletcher, because I had Fletcher on at the Super Bowl, and he was sitting right across from me. So I tried to read some body language. He looked like a guy
with that.
Yeah, good luck with that is right. He was wearing a camo with a hat, and he sat back, and he gave no indication. He said, "You never know. Don't know. You never know." Like I asked him 4 different ways. We tried to get something out of him, and he just would not budge. With Fletcher, you had the feeling last couple years when he had been, they released him and then they brought him back. And then last year that he would go someplace else, like that he would get an offer and go somewhere. And I still think that he probably could get that offer and go. But I do think it's whether or not he wants to keep playing or not is the bigger thing here. Now, after last year, you would wonder, why is that even a question? And you would think the Eagles could use him on a lesser role. But the question, I guess, for him is, does he want to play at a lesser role salary? That's the bigger thing for Fletcher for me. Does he want to be the guy that is Brandon Graham 1 year, $4.5 million or $8 million, even to, I think Fletcher thinks that he's still a big money player. And I don't know that.
And oh, by the way, are you going to disagree with him on that? Quick question for John McMullen and Mike Gill. Who is the most consistent defensive player for the Philadelphia Eagles this year? Not best, most consistent defensive player for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I mean, Fletcher is in the conversation. If it's not him, he's in the conversation. No question. And the big questions for me, man, I know we got to probably get ready to roll, but there's so many things with Fangio. How does he view Jordan Davis? Does he say, that's a guy I can't wait to get my hands on? Does he look at Jalen Carter and say, that's a guy? Now, I figure he wants to get Jalen Carter.
Yeah, everybody
Carter
wants to get
and Davis coexist together in his mind. And if you bring Fletcher Cox back, what does that do to Davis? Because I think what Fangio views from Davis is a big key here. Does he say 20% snaps, Busteroni, first-round pick? Stupid.
No, he sees this. I know what Bick sees with Jordan Davis. He sees Akeem Hicks.
There we go.
He sees Akeem Hicks, hopefully, who he had in Chicago. But with Jalen Carter, yeah. But Jody's point to consistency, yeah, probably was the most consistent Eagle. It was a bad defensive year, and Slay was hurt.
So how do you ask your most consistent player? Yeah, we're gonna need you to take a hometown discount now. Even though there's a team out there that's willing to pay you $10 million again next year, we're gonna ask you to play for $5 million for us. If I'm Fletcher Cox, I got something to sell to you here. Yeah, no, I'm not taking a hometown discount. I was the most consistent player on your defense, and you want me to take a pay cut? No, thank you. Someone else is willing to make me whole? No, thank you. I know how he said, well, we got to keep him in our uniform. Well, you're not showing me the love by asking me to play for less, Mike Gill. If you're Fletcher Cox, why would you say, yeah, fine, give me whatever you want. I got to play one more year, and I got to do it.
I don't
buy that.
I don't think he's in the Brandon Graham camp where he just wants to come back just to accrue seasons under his belt for whatever price the two sides are willing to agree on. I think Fletcher's saying, I'll play, but I'm not playing just as a guy dog and pony show here to wave to the sideline. I'm playing because you want to play me. You want me to be a part of the rotation.
Yeah. At Mike Gill's show, make sure you follow Mike on X, Twitter, the Sports Bash every afternoon. If you're local in South Jersey, 97.3, you can listen to Mike there. Since we were talking about Fletcher, I'll end it with Vic Fangio. Howie was asked, is Vic going to have a big import on personnel? And he kind of chuckled. He thinks so.
He thinks he will.
Think so.
What did you think? I mean, look, Howie's going to take what Vic wants into account, but Howie's going to take, and I think he kind of proved that. Is that the way you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, look, the way I described it is Sean Desai got here late and didn't have a big voice to say, these are the guys I like. These are the guys I need. These are the guys that I've fit my system. Vic Fangio can come in and I think has a big enough presence and voice and relationship with Howie that he's been here enough to say, hey, Howie, I'm telling you, if you can get insert name Van Ginkel, I know what he can be in this defense. Let's go get him. We're decide who could he have really vouched for last year? Who was he going to go out? There's multiple guys on the free agent market who have played for Vic Fangio. I mean, Josie Jewell, hey, there's a linebacker in Denver, Howie. We need a linebacker. I'm telling you, you get that guy, and that will change the – so he's got a much stronger case, and that's based on multiple things. He's been around the league. You have more context when he got here as opposed to decide. So he's got a lot of built-in advantages.
All right, last one for me, Mike, and I'm going to ask you a question that I'll ask you again next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, all the way up until the first game of the season. And feel free to change your mind on a weekly basis if you so desire. But I need an answer today. I don't think Nick Sirianni gave DeAndre Swift a whole hell of a lot of support yesterday. He was asked about the running game, and he said, we run the football pretty damn well every single year. In other words,
sounds like Mike Gill and Jody McDonald can run, and we're going to have a top 10 running.
Yeah, I was a pretty good running back at one point, man.
Yeah, not yours truly. So it wasn't a ringing endorsement of bringing Swift back. So the question is this week, next week, the week after, the man who will get most touches out of the backfield, either handed it to him, tossed to him, flipped to him, whatever else, for the Philadelphia Eagles next year will be who, Mike Gill?
Well, it's funny because yesterday he did mention Gainwell. Is that the Trey Sermon mention that you got mentioned?
No, they love Kenny. That's legit.
Right.
They love Kenny.
Remember last year he went out of his way to mention Trey Sermon. Don't even ask him about Trey Sermon. Where did that come from?
Default Trey Sermon. When in doubt, default to Trey Sermon.
We talked about running backs last week because I mentioned Eckler and Pollard, and nobody got tagged. So that'll be another story because I don't think any of those running backs are going to get what they want. So,
and that brings down the cost for Swift because Swift is not
exactly. That's something I discussed yesterday. Is now Swift's price has to go down because there's 5 other guys whose price who just went down. So for week 1, if you're asking me,
timeout Philadelphia, timeout NFL. I think that's a misnomer. Ooh, if a guy doesn't get tagged, that means everybody's price goes down. No, it doesn't. It just means the board. The Giants could have, or we'll use Pollard because Mike said Pollard. The Cowboys could have tagged Pollard. They didn't. Well, guess what? Now, if they can't retain Pollard, they need a back. So they're going to pay for a back. You didn't create a way of all
not 12 million. They're not.
Well, I understand, but somebody's got to be your lead back going into
the
season, right?
My only point in bringing that up is those 5 guys on the market, those 4 or 5 guys on the market.
And there are 4 or 5 more teams on the market for a lead back who would have not needed a lead back if they had franchised their guys. So the market stays the same.
Yeah, I disagree because
it's not monetarily.
Whether it's, Dallas, yes. If they sign Tony Pollard, and it doesn't create a new role if they go out and get Saquon Barkley, or whether they're not going to. But you get my point. It doesn't create those 5 guys are going first, are getting more money. Maybe not Eckler, because Eckler's had a really down year, a lot of touches, a lot of tread off the tire. Maybe not Eckler, but the big 4, they're getting more money. Then that's all I mean. That doesn't matter where it lands. Same amount of teams are going to be looking for running backs, but those guys are getting more money than DeAndre Swift, and that in theory should bring the price down for DeAndre at least a little bit.
Yeah, I don't agree with that theory. I think his money will be what his money is. There's the same number of teams that need the same number of
last year, Sanders got what, $6 million a year?
6.5, basically.
Yeah. The Swift is that's the over under, Jody.
Yeah, Swift is going to be under that. But Swift was going to be under that if Barkley got tagged and Jacobs got tagged and Eckler got tagged and Henry got tagged. He's going to be under anyway. He's not getting Miles got the money. It didn't come close to hurting the money. So the league as a whole is going to go.
Yeah, that probably
why
hurt
would we go there?
DeAndre. Yeah,
that had a bigger effect on what DeAndre is going to make than what DeAndre did or what other guys did or didn't get tagged.
And by the way, I don't necessarily know if DeAndre Swift wants to come back. I think the assumption is because he's a Billy guy that he wants to come back because he had a career year. I do not think he likes the way he was used in this offense. And they're going to have to do some lobbying about the passing game. Now, maybe they can do that with Kellen Moore, who's got a bigger history of getting the ball to the back. Maybe they can say, we're going to get you the ball. But I don't even know if DeAndre wants to come back, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Boston Scott was the highest paid back on this team last year. I guess, what's the limit of how high? Like, even if Swift said, I want to be back and I'll take less. Even if he says I'll take less, that number is probably higher than the Eagles want to pay.
That's true too. So I think it's unlikely he returns. I do. But we'll see.
And then I will second guess the Eagles. I'm sorry. They have devalued the running back. You're telling me that DeAndre Swift, well, give me the numbers, both of you two guys. What do you think is the top dollar value the Eagles will go for a running back anywhere?
3-4 million.
I was going to say 3.5. 3.5.
Top.
Money, and that's why I said last week, a guy like Eckler, if he's just sitting there and nobody, and he's still hanging out in the third phase of free agency, that's where you say, hey, $3.5 million for a year. You can come play here. You know the offense. And that's how they end up with a guy like that.
Then I'll ask each of you guys. Same price tag, $3.5 million. Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift. They both want to play. They're both willing to take $3.5 million as their salary. Which one would you prefer for the Eagles?
I would take Swift because I think Eckler is. I think he's washed. I think the Eagles should avoid him at all costs. He is
with the pandering because, I think a lot of people would hear the name Eckler and get excited and think that he's a big addition. But I think Swift, and I'm not the biggest Swift guy in the world either, but I think Swift's a better, more dynamic.
Eckler's turning 29 in May. So, number one, he's getting near 30 for the running back position. He's touched it over 1,400 times. I would run from him. If you have a running back, have him run from Austin Eckler.
Yeah.
I don't think the Eagles will even think about Austin Eckler.
So you think Kellen Moore is going to have less to say about? Well, but Kellen was only there for 1 year, and Eckler went backwards on him.
By the way, I think a lot of people. That's another thing. I think a lot of people. And I know we're keeping it. I apologize, Mike. I think a lot of people assume because somebody was with somebody at some spot. Kellen Moore saw Austin Eckler average 3.5 yards per carry. He might be the first guy saying, guess what, guys? He's not the same player.
Right.
Exactly right. Mike Gill, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much. You look good in your Arizona colors this week. Can't wait to see what you roll out for us next week. The well-traveled Mike Gill here with us on Birds 365. We'll catch Mike next week.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
You guys.
Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call one of the two managing general partners, Jim or Fran, and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno. I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up, and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
You got Mac and Mac here. Jody McDonald and John McMullen on Birds 365. Appreciate your streaming on in and hitting us up with your comments on the stream. A couple of interesting ones today. I had the comment via Twitter last night on my show on WIP, John, which I thought was interesting at first, but then the more I thought about it, I said, yeah, no, that's too much. Get your take on it. You mentioned him earlier, L'Jarius Sneed, who you said you don't necessarily think would be a fit for what his price tag is going to be for the Eagles defense, that he's kind of like some of the guys down in Miami who played under Vic, who weren't happy with the way he used his secondary because that's just not his system, playing a lot of press cornering up in guys' faces. And that is certainly part of L'Jarius Sneed's game. But he's just an all-around talented player, too, who I think if you put him in a zone defense, a Fangio-type defense, would be really good at it. It might not be his favorite. It might not give him the chance to show off his skills because he's as talented and varied a player as he is, but doesn't mean that he would fail at it. I think he'd be very good in it. Is he worth $19 million to just be a Fangio corner, though? That's a legitimate question. So someone ran this by me last night. And I was surprised the Chiefs did that. Let me start there. Were you surprised the Chiefs let it leak out, or they planted the information, whatever? I don't know how it came down, not close enough to the situation. They would think about throwing the franchise tag on Sneed and then turn around and trading him, which is certainly better than, that's why anyone who suggests, oh, we can get Sneed via free agency. He was never seeing free agency. There was no way the Kansas City Chiefs were going to let him walk out the door and get nothing in exchange for him. That was overly optimistic. Oh, we can sign him as a free agent. No, you can't. He's never going to hit free agency. So they said at least the report said, they could tag him and trade him. Is there any way that a trade for L'Jarius Sneed for Hassan Reddick works? because the Eagles are in the same position with Hassan Reddick. Oh, go out and check the market. We'll see what we get in return for you in a trade. Could a trade between the Chiefs and the Eagles for those two players work?
I'm trying to think about it. I don't think so from the standpoint of one, the Chiefs have some pretty good young pass rushers. Now the one kid got hurt. I don't know how serious it is, but obviously Karlaftis is kind of turning a corner. We know how much they're going to pay Chris Jones. It's going to be astronomical. Now he's an inside player, but still, you're talking about. Remember, I always talk about these things don't happen in a vacuum. You got a budget. You're spending a lot of money at that particular position, and all that kind of stuff.
Well,
And
they're
then
not
from
spending it at that position. They're spending it on other positions, but the Chiefs aren't paying anybody coming off the edge
defensive
right now.
defensive line is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So you have to and again, I should say defensive front for all the what's on the stream. I'm talking about edge players. I'm not, oh, he's a Sam linebacker. Those idiots. But you get my point, Jody. I don't think it's a fit for either side. I think the Eagles are too smart to bring L'Jarius Sneed in the Vic Fangio's defense. I think. Now, Howie likes to make splashes. Maybe he takes the assessment you just took. It's just a good player. You put a good player in any system, he's going to be a good player. But I would put, and I know this for a fact because he's told me, Nick Sirianni thinks the best cornerback in football is Jalen Ramsey, the most talented cornerback in football.
Sirianni says this?
Yes. It don't get better than Jalen Ramsey. Now he's getting up there. I don't know. It's the 7th, 8th year. Maybe he's not at the height of what he once was, but he is a big time talent. I mean, no offense to L'Jarius Sneed. He's not Jalen Ramsey. And he didn't like playing in that defense. I don't think L'Jarius Sneed's going to like playing in this defense because of what he does well. And you can go all the way back to Nnamdi Asomugha. You bring in a player at $19 million, say it might even be more than that, but say $19 million a year, whatever. You bring it, the expectations ramp up. He's got to be one of the best corners in football. How do you be one of the best corners in football when you're not doing what you did in Kansas City? And he was given the opportunity to make plays, and he was given the opportunity to stand out in coverage and shut people down. How do you become a player worth $19 million? I think it's raw. I did a thing for Sports Illustrated, pits and misses for each position of need. Austin Eckler I had in there as a miss for the reasons we just talked about.
Yep.
Sneed I had in there for these reasons I'm talking about. Not a fit here. Great player. I'm not trying to insult the player. Just not a fit here. So I don't like it from a number of different directions, but I don't think either team would be interested in adding. Well, one of the reasons the Chiefs are looking to tag and trade Sneed, they want something obviously back, but they have their own crunch. They don't want to lose a 19 and bring in a $25 million player. So I don't think it fits from either direction.
Understood. But one thing you said was really interesting to me. I'd never heard this, that Nick Sirianni was outspoken that Jalen Ramsey was the best corner in the National Football League. So if Jalen Ramsey heard that, wanted to play with Nick Sirianni, what would Nick Sirianni do? Say, yeah, sorry, yeah, I know you're the best cornerback in football, but you can't play in my system because I'm a Fangio guy. I believe in not giving up the big plays. I believe in zone concepts. Sorry about that, big guy. You may be the best cornerback in the league, but you can't play for me. Would Sirianni really do that?
Probably not. Everything.
Then why wouldn't he do the same thing for Sneed?
Because they're not the same. With all due respect to Leger, they're not.
Yeah, you know why they're not the same on the birth certificate too.
Yeah, I mean, he's not.
If I can take one of those two guys for the next 4 years, I'm taking Sneed.
That's fine, but yeah, he doesn't think of Leger. He thinks very highly of Jalen Ramsey, very, 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 very highly. As in, and bring up somebody else. He thinks more of Jalen Ramsey than he thinks of just about any other cornerback, even his own cornerbacks, which he would never admit in public. But he thinks he's the best cornerback in football.
But is that not weird if Seranni, and he has steadfastly said, even when Gannon went out the door before they decided on the side, we this is the way we play. I believe in don't give up chunk plays. And he signed, sealed, and delivered. We're sticking with this type of system, zone-based, heavy zone, not worried about getting up and pressing guys in the coverage. If he feels that strongly about defense and the way you should deploy your secondary, how do you like a get up in their face, check them on the line of scrimmage?
Well, he wouldn't be the first guy. As I often point out, he often contradicts himself in the same press conference.
And I'm sorry, Nick, if it's my job to point out when you do come off as a hypocrite, sorry, Nick.
There's certain guys, and you bring it, and when he talked about it, and you're right, he is getting older. That's why I brought up one of the points. When he was in with the Rams and you had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, you had the best defensive player, the best defensive front player, you had the best cornerback in football at the same time, which rarely happens. When you have different, that's kind of my point. There's certain guys, I covered one of them, was Randy Moss. You can compare other wide receivers during Randy Moss's era. They're not comparable. They're good players. They're not comparable. Jalen Ramsey's in that category. So with all due respect,
no, he's not Randy Moss.
Yes,
Come on.
he is.
He's not.
Amongst NFL players, he is. And that's what I'm saying. Amongst NFL players, NFL coaches, boy, I get the feeling you don't understand how much they value that talent of Jalen Ramsey. He's different. He's different. So it's not a comparison from that standpoint. As far as, and again, I'm not picking on L'Jarius Sneed, but I don't think he's a fit as a zone corner. I think Jalen Ramsey could play it and be effective as he did with the Dolphins. They were a completely different team when he was on the field versus when he was off the field, because he was injured early in the season with the meniscus. When he came back, they were a completely different team, which is rare with a cornerback. And he didn't like it, and he's still good at it. And that's the thing. They might not like it, but they could still be good at it. There are other guys who are, all right, that's a press corner. That's a zone. Bradberry's a zone corner. If you ask him to press, good luck. Then you got, everybody's complaining. He got dusted by so-and-so, by Puka Nacua, and the rest actually good coverage, but I was laughing at people. You don't ask people what they don't do well. You ask people what they do well, but there are certain guys that can do everything well. Doesn't mean they're happy with it. I just go back to Minkah Fitzpatrick when he got traded from, ironically, the Dolphins to the Steelers. I remember, because Malcolm Jenkins was still here, and I tell this story all the time. Malcolm loved that Jim Schwartz let him play different positions. Loved it.
Yeah. Different guys
Loved
have
it.
different ways to
He
look
took
at it.
He took it as a challenge. It kept him engaged. He just enjoyed it. And the Dolphins wanted to do that with Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Minkah was like, I don't want to do that. I want to play center field. And there's guys who just have different mentalities and look at things in different ways. And boy, I see, And if Sneed comes here, he's a good player. I'm not trying, but the expectations, Jody, I think it would be a disaster. I really do. In this scheme, I think it would be a disaster.
I just wanted to run it by you, but that does surprise me. Apparently you're in lockstep with Nick Sirianni.
Well, part of the reason I'm lockstep
so far is to comp him to Randy Moss. Randy Moss, first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't even know that Jalen Ramsey is a Hall of Famer. Certainly not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Jalen Ramsey isn't the cornerbacks in his era what Randy Moss was to wide receivers in his era. I mean, neither you nor Nick Sirianni can convince me of that.
He's only been playing for 7-8 years. So I'm talking, would you have said the same thing with Randy in his 7th season? If I would have said, so he's in, it's different. Now we know the hindsight. So what does he play? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 seasons of Jalen Ramsey. 7 Pro Bowls, 3 All Pros, 2 second team. So 5 All Pros. I mean, yes, he is. He is the preeminent corner of his generation, which is right now. He is the preeminent corner of this generation of football. Now, part of it is that he bounced around, and that also happened with Randy. Randy started in Minnesota, then he got angry about a certain something, and he had I think he went to Oakland, I think burst, and ultimately, so he started bouncing around. And people would hold that against him. Jaylen has bounced around a little bit because he's had issues. But as far as on the field, man, I wish you could hear people discuss him because I think it would change your sentiment.
Not even close. Randy Moss is the second best receiver in the history of the national.
Oh, I agree with that.
I don't believe when his career is over and done with, if you tell me that he's going to be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year in year 9 with a new defense coordinator down in Miami who may just come in and go, yeah, whatever you want, Jaylen. We'll build the defense around you. Not happening.
Well, nobody's building.
Even if they did that, I don't think he's going to be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. So there's no way he's getting in the
nobody. Randy was not. Guess what? Adrian Peterson. And I covered that team. Adrian Peterson was the MVP. Randy Moss was never the MVP. Randy Moss is more of a generational player. He plays a position where you can't build an offense around a wide receiver. The Eagles did. And by the way, A.J. Brown, you can see the difference between the Eagles offense with A.J. Brown and not A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown has talked to me about every great corner in football. And AJ's the kind of guy who's got so much confidence in himself. He thinks he can beat anybody. And I'll ask him about particular corners in a particular game. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but it's basically like, he's not that good. He's not that, not Ramsey. He's like, yeah, he's good. He's good. So hey, part of it is the way coaches and players talk about the player. I always say, and it could be different levels too. Randy's an all-time great. I'm not trying to dismiss Randy. I'm with you. He's the second best wide receiver ever lived. The people in Philadelphia think Terrell Owens is better than Randy Moss. I laugh at them. Not that Terrell Owens was a bad player. That's not even a comp in my mind. So I think very, very highly of Randy Moss. And no, what I put, part of it is that cornerbacks have changed. They're more gifted today, but the game is different. So they can't be as dominant as old school corners because they're not allowed to be as dominant. But if you can play press coverage today, you're probably better than anybody in the past because the athletes have gotten better and all that kind of stuff. So it depends how you framework it. But there's no question he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. There's no question Jalen Ramsey's going to be a Hall of Fame player, barring, an injury and he's never played again. And he might even be a Hall of Fame player now. We can ask when we get our buddies on. They'll talk about longevity, but there have been guys, whether it's Terrell Davis, Tony Baselli, it might take them. They didn't have the long careers, but they were so dominant in his short careers. He's going to keep playing. So there's no question he's going to be a Hall of Fame player. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go Randy, Randy's better than just about everybody. So I guess, yeah.
No, I didn't go Randy. You went Randy. I didn't.
Well, because I talk about people. Aaron Donald. I tell it all the way. Same way.
Aaron Donald, first ballot Hall of Famer. Jalen.
Well,
Ramsey,
talking to Brandon. But guess what? Michael Vick. Players talk about Michael Vick in awe because of his skill set. When players talk about other players and they're in awe of them, I take notice. That doesn't always be at the level of Randy or Aaron Donald, but I take notice when they respect other players to the point where it's over the top, because that's when you know somebody is super, super, super good and super talented. Now, did Michael Vick live up to his talent? Probably not. And there were some obvious issues. But, people talked about him the same way. And those are the guys I'm talking. Jalen Ramsey's in that category of guys other players are in awe of. And that speaks very highly to me, to say the least.
Well, then that should, at least in part, worry some Eagle fans, because if Jalen Ramsey is that good and commands that kind of respect, he's spitting all over Vic Fangio. He can't do enough of it from down in Miami.
Well, there were a lot of Miami. I mean, talented corners don't want to play zone. They don't. The guys who can cover don't want to play zone. They don't. So if you're going to play a heavy zone scheme, I think it's a waste of time to go get it, because the guys who get paid at the top level, those are the press coverage guys. And look, you can do it. And some of them are so good, they'll make it work to a degree where it's certainly going to be serviceable. And that's where we started with Sneed. Maybe Sneed is that guy. Maybe he is. It'll be serviceable. But for the expectations of a $20 million corner,
right,
$19 million
if you're going to pay him, then that means the Eagles aren't going to pay anybody this year at cornerback. They may cling to Bradberry, which, again, I was surprised yesterday when Howie said, I know he was just about to get off the podium. He didn't really get in depth, and the answer that he gave, his in-depth part of it was more kind of like making excuses for Bradberry that, we had him in the slot, which wasn't really his position. He's more of an outside guy, and maybe that's on me because I didn't give him enough bullets in the slot that the coaches felt they had to do that. But then he finished up with, he's part of the team. He's part of the team. That surprised me that he went down that road, that he was committed. Now, you and I say this all the time. How can change his mind tomorrow? He was committed on February 27th. James Bradberry's part of the team. Doesn't mean on March 3rd that he can change his mind and go, well, he's not part of the team today. We're going to do something else, or the leading up to free agency or the draft. So he's not one of my favorite McMullen-isms. He wasn't under oath yesterday. So he's not going to be held to that. But I was just surprised that he went there, that on this given day, he did say he's part of the team. So you're telling me, John, don't expect the Eagles to go out and sink any significant money into cornerback unless a guy is a definitively good defensive zone corner. That they're not going to pay
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying top of the line. They might draft a corner in the first round. They pay Darius Slay. They pay James Bradberry significant money. It is a position of value for them. I think Howie's too smart to pay, again, the number one corner on the market, undoubtedly. At the top level, which is going to be $19-20 million minimum, might even be more. I think he's too smart to pay that kind of money to a player who's main skill, his best skill is press, and he understands what the scheme is. That's my opinion. And you just have Jalen, Ramsey, and Zabe. That's why I brought up Jalen. And Xavier didn't say it. Jalen said it, so I won't blame Xavier and Howie. But he's similar. He's a press corner. He's been a press corner. And evidently they didn't like it. Jalen certainly didn't like it. The Xavier, I don't believe, liked it as well. And there have been other players as well from Miami. But I think he's too smart to go in that direction. Now, if he drafts the kid from Missouri in the first round, or a Quinyon Mitchell falls, which I don't think he will, and he drafts him in the first round, yeah, that's fine. You know, they got a rookie deal. It's going to be pretty high money, obviously, for a first round pick, but nonetheless, you got 5 years, which is at least serviceable.
22 isn't 4.
Yeah.
First round draft pick scales down. And you're right. First round draft pick. But then you get the added value of getting that 5th-year
option
lock in.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about free agency till you get 6 years.
So it's a position they value, but that, to me, there's a big difference from $12 million to top of the market $20 million player, especially when you're getting that $20 million player to play in a totally different scheme than he was successful in. Let's be honest. Other than Brian Flores, there is not a more different scheme in the NFL. Maybe Wink Martindale, maybe Brian Flores, and then Steve Spagnuolo's scheme than what the Eagles played defensively. Am I wrong from that standpoint?
No.
It's a completely different sentiment of playing football.
There are two things you got to take into consideration: the type of zone, the type of defense you want to play as compared to the one the player is coming out of. And yeah, other than you, and maybe shame on the Dolphins for this, because they came in, swooped in, and took Vic Fangio away. They had to know that they were taking in Vic Fangio to play Fangio's zone defense, right? And they've got Xavier, and Howard and Jalen Ramsey there. So what were they thinking? Why would you bring in a guy who is zone concept at the yin yang for his defensive backs when you've got two of the good young press, well, not young, but two of the best press corners in the National Football League? Was that just a dumb hire by the Dolphins?
Maybe they think so. I mean, and then you add the money on top of it, making him the highest paid coordinator. And they were happy to get out of it. So clearly they thought they made a mistake after the season. Yeah. So, and they went to Anthony Weaver, who's coming from the Baltimore system, which again would be, at least on paper, not to the degree of Kansas City or Flores or Martindale, but more of what would fit some of the players they have. Would be, I would say, the Baltimore method of defense.
And if it's a better fit, then that'll be good for the Dolphins. We'll see how the fit works out here with Fangio in Philadelphia. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. The Mac and Mac Birds 365 guys. You know what we got to do. Come back and put a bow on this show.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up, and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Mac guys here on Birds 365. Yes, the next 2 days we'll get that much more into guys who are draft eligible, guys who are competing. Well, they're not really competing, but performing. That would be the better word. Performing.
Well, you're competing against each other, I guess, in the clock.
The clock. They're more 40-yard dash. They're competing against that 4.37 as compared to 4.41. Ooh, that 400ths of a second is all the difference in the world. It's basically laughable, but it is what it is. And we'll certainly factor in more of what the Eagles are doing, what the Eagles are looking for. No one has started to compete with themselves or the clock or anybody else yet. That doesn't even get underway till tomorrow, but we'll do a little bit more with what the Eagles are looking at, who are the players that need to have an eye kept on them because they kind of fit the system and are the kind of players that the Eagles might have interest in. We'll surely do more of that the next 2 days. But before we get out of here today, we mentioned it in passing yesterday. We didn't do a whole hell of a lot of it. And I was very interested to see if it became part of the conversation with Seranni, and it really didn't. Marcus Hayes, with the article that he wrote prior to the general manager and the coach stepping up to the podium, talking about how Nick Sirianni this year handled different players differently. Not the first time it's ever happened in the National Football League.
I brought up Jimmy yesterday, Jimmy Johnson. Yeah.
Right.
I thought that, I love Marcus. You know that. We have Marcus on the show. Maybe we should
try and get him tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, I think it's common sense. I think everybody does it. You are treated differently depending on, and if you're the fifth receiver on this team and you expect to be treated like AJ Brown, well, guess what? Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way in any NFL city. And we brought up the Emmitt Smith conversation, Jimmy Johnson. I'll treat you all fairly. I'm not going to treat you all the same. That's Scoopy. Think about Deshaun Watson. You think a third-string quarterback is going to live through those allegations and get the largest contract in NFL history at the time? No. That to me is common. That happens everywhere. I don't think that's a big deal at all. Your thoughts on that, Joey?
Right. Here's where I guess I'll come to Marcus's defense a little bit. You're right. To think that 53 guys are all going to be treated exactly the same is ridiculous. There's no way that can happen. There are levels of talent. There are levels of contract. There's a level of leadership that have to be factored in. So that's a pipe dream to think everybody's going to be treated exactly the same. But it is a balancing act that a coach has to do. On every team I ever played on, the coaches treated kids differently. And I played on teams where I was the best player. And I played on teams where I was at second string at best. And there were better guys than me on the team. So I got treated differently by different coaches. you want to be able to handle both. You want to be able to cut some slack to your starts, ask them to do other things, not ask them to do things. And then your guys who are earning and fighting for playing time and the like. It can't be this hard and fast caste system of you guys don't have any rules and you guys have more rules than you can keep track of. It is a balancing act. And maybe Sirianni misbalanced it a little bit this year. I'm not there every single day. Marcus got quotes from guys who were players, who were there and were treated differently by both the head coach. And by the way, Marcus's article did include the coordinators, that somehow some of them were actually scared of players on the team, that Brian Johnson was intimidated by A.J. Brown. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's what Marcus reported. I think that it could have been done better if Marcus's reporting is accurate, that maybe Sirianni's balance wasn't perfect, but I'm not going to go to the other end of, oh my God, you got to treat everybody exactly the same. That's just not reality in 2023.
Yeah.
There are going to be varying sets of rules for different players on a team.
I don't think it was ever true. Never mind now. And again, Jimmy, now we can go back to Jimmy, and that's a long time ago now. I don't think it's ever been that case. I think it's always been the way that if you're a star player, certainly you're treated a little bit differently. And I think that will continue. I think it's the difference between winning and losing. I do. When you're winning, everything's copacetic. When you're losing, everything is under the microscope, and they were losing. So all of a sudden, and I'm sure Marcus's reporting is accurate, although I would say A.J. Brown's the nicest guy in the freaking world. I don't know who he's intimidating, other than the fact he's built like a, brick, what.
And he is very well and able to share his opinions loudly during the game. You got to at least acknowledge that.
There are, like Mike was talking about interviewing Fletcher Cox. Fletcher's intimidating. If Fletcher gets pissed at you, and a lot of people saw him get pissed at Jeff McLean, Fletcher's intimidating. AJ's not intimidating. He's just not. Nicest guy in the world. To me, it's the difference between winning and losing. And they were losing. So everything comes up. And, if you're down on the roster and you're losing and you see AJ, going off script and not getting any criticism, I can see how it can get frustrating. But I just talked about Randy Moss a lot. We just talked about Randy. Guess what? Nobody was telling Randy what he was doing wrong. It was like, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's indifferent, but I don't think it's different in any other NFL city. I really don't.
And one thing that I can basically guarantee you, Eagle fans, on the defense side of the ball, there's the 53 men. It's all one big unit. It's a culture that the entire Philadelphia Eagle team is supposed to draw from, as per put in place by Nick Sirianni. But we know there's also separation of church and state. There's offense and there's defense. And it's going to be pretty prevalent on the Philadelphia Eagles, because despite Nick jokingly saying in his last meeting, well, I may 10 more defensive meetings coming up. No, you're not, because Vic Fangio doesn't want you in that room. Vic Fangio is going to be a take charge guy on the defensive side of the ball. Although I liked Sean Desai as a guy, I don't believe he was a take charge guy. He didn't show that to me during the season in the way that he coached or any of his, John, you were there every single Tuesday for all the coordinator. Sean Desai didn't have the commanding presence of Jim Short.
No, I mean,
and he won't have the commanding presence of Vic Fangio either.
I can't. Now I'm going into Sean Desai defend mode. I do think I think early in the season, I think people forget there was some good stuff coming from Sean Desai. There were some good moments. There were some interesting things. He was willing to try different things, sometimes good, sometimes bad. James Bradberry in the slot would be bad. But he had an open mind. I like that. We talked about the Miami game. There were certain games where he said, wow, this is pretty good. And I think if you go back early in the season, there were times where you saw fans, he's going to be better than Jonathan Gannon. He's doing different things. And then it all went off the wheels, and he had all these conversations of, he's a teacher. He doesn't have a presence. Gannon had a presence. Schwartz certainly had a presence. He doesn't have that presence. Vic will have that presence. I mean, to me, it's sort of like we talked about with young players early in the show. If you don't give them an opportunity, how do they get a presence? You're going to write them off. I said, you're hiring, and Nick talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I know we got to go pretty soon, but, you're hiring, you need to get young players on the field. They need that opportunity. You're hiring first-time coaches in the case of Brian Johnson, first-time offensive coordinator. His second year for Sean Desai as a defensive coordinator, but very young. And you're not expecting growing pains. To me, that's the biggest egregious part of this. I mean, you think there's going to be no growing? You just went through it with Gannon and Sirianni. He mentioned, I was a first-year coach. Gannon was a first-year defensive coordinator. If you go back to 2021, they both had significant growing pains, and you allowed them to grow.
But then let me ask you this. Why the hell did he pull the plug on Desai? If Nick is you got to be able to grow and you got to be patient. Why the hell did he pull the plug on him? Was ready to think about pulling the plug after 9 weeks, and then officially pulled the plug after 11 weeks.
I've told you pretty consistently, Jody, for the people that wanted Nick Sirianni fired, I said on this show numerous times, stop talking about the offense. The fireable offense is what he did with the defensive coordinator. I've said that pretty consistently. It was a dumb decision. It didn't work. It was a disastrous decision in hindsight. And you're right. He contradicted himself. He didn't give him time. And he's talking about giving guys time.
Right.
Well, you didn't give him time. You needed time. You needed now he sees things behind the scenes. I don't know. Maybe Sean Desai was completely in over his head. I don't know. I guess that's a possibility. I find it hard to believe, but I guess it's a possibility. But yeah, I said I want Nick Sirianni fired crowd, you should have started your first bullet point, which should have been what he did with Sean Desai and Matt Patricia.
I said fireable offense several times here on the show, but Sean Desai, good luck. He did get a gig. He's out in L.A. More sunshine for you, Sean. Enjoy yourself out in La La Land.
Yeah, and you're with Sean McVay now, so you'll be touched by the hand of God, or at least a football god.
And he's doing something other than going from hotel to convention center in Indianapolis this week, because Rams don't show up for the combine. They don't need to be there for the combine. So Sean's got this week off too. So enjoy, Sean. We do not have the week off. We will be back here again tomorrow and Friday. We'll try and get more into some of the players because Nick and Howie both talk.
And we're going to have Randy Mueller from Indy tomorrow, former NFL Executive of the Year. So Randy's going to join the program tomorrow.
We'll get his take on some of the players who will be working out, competing, call it whatever you want, and guys the Eagles could have interest in. I'm back here in 22 hours. Johnny Mac's back here in 22 hours. That means you have to be back here in 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.